I'll destroy you. Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed beats down Paul Heyman on SmackDown. This is the most disgusting, despicable, and absolutely unforgivable act of violence I have ever witnessed on SmackDown. Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed just put their hands on Paul Heyman, a 58-year-old non-wrestler, and beat him down in an assault so brutal, so vicious, so completely unnecessary that I am literally shaking with rage right now. These two absolute monsters attacked the wise man, Roman Reigns' most trusted advisor, a defenseless man who has never claimed to be a fighter, and they did it with smiles on their faces like they were enjoying every single second of his suffering. What makes this even more infuriating is that WWE is glorifying this attack, treating it like some kind of badass moment instead of the cowardly, disgraceful assault that it actually is. Where was security? Where was management? Where was anyone to stop two of the biggest, most dangerous athletes in WWE from hospitalizing a man who weighs maybe 180 pounds soaking wet? I don't care what your opinion is on Paul Heyman as a character, nobody deserves to be beaten down like that, and the fact that Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed think this makes them tough is absolutely pathetic. This attack changes everything for the Bloodline, for SmackDown, and for how we view Breakker and Reed as performers, and I'm about to break down exactly why this moment is either the most heinous act of violence in modern WWE or a brilliant piece of storytelling that's going to lead to the most intense revenge angle we've seen in years. Let me set the scene, because if you somehow missed this attack, you need to understand just how brutal and uncalled for it was. Paul Heyman was in the ring cutting a promo on behalf of Roman Reigns, doing what he does best: talking, manipulating, playing mind games with whoever the tribal chief's latest adversaries are. Paul wasn't threatening violence. He wasn't challenging anyone to a fight. He was literally just talking, using words, being a manager doing his job. And then the music hit. Bron Breakker's theme blasted through the arena, and the crowd popped because Breakker is over. People love his intensity and his athletic ability. But then Bronson Reed's music hit too, and suddenly we realize these two aren't coming out separately, they're coming out together. They're aligned. They're a team. And they're both staring at Paul Heyman in the ring like predators who just spotted their prey. Paul's face said everything. The wise man, who's usually so confident and in control, looked terrified. He immediately started backing up, started trying to talk his way out of the situation, started begging Breakker and Reed to be reasonable. And you know what those two monsters did? They laughed. They found Paul's fear funny. They enjoyed watching this 58-year-old man plead for mercy. Breakker entered the ring first, and Paul tried to escape through the opposite side. But Bronson Reed was waiting there, cutting off his escape route. Paul was trapped with nowhere to go, surrounded by two of the most physically intimidating superstars in WWE, with no backup in sight and no way to defend himself. And then it happened. Breakker grabbed Paul by the throat and threw him across the ring like he weighed nothing. Paul crashed into the corner, and before he could even process what happened, Bronson Reed was charging at him with that devastating corner splash that's put multiple wrestlers out of action. The impact was sickening. You could hear the air leave Paul's lungs. You could see his body go limp from the force of Reed's 330 pounds crushing him against the turnbuckles. But they didn't stop there. Oh no, that would be too merciful. Breakker picked Paul up and hit him with the most vicious spear I've ever seen him deliver. Paul wasn't even conscious at that point, but Breakker speared him anyway, driving him into the mat with full force like Paul was an actual wrestler who could take that kind of punishment. Let me ask you right now in the comments, is there any justification for Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed attacking Paul Heyman like this? Can you think of any storyline reason that makes this acceptable? Because I'm struggling to find one, and I need to hear your perspectives. The worst part of this entire attack, and trust me, every part was terrible, was what happened after the initial beatdown. Referees rushed to the ring to check on Paul. Medical staff came out with a stretcher. And Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed just stood there at the top of the ramp, admiring their work, looking proud of themselves for beating up a man who couldn't fight back. Breakker grabbed a microphone, and I'm not making this up, he laughed before saying, "Roman Reigns, you think your wise man can protect you? You think Paul Heyman's words mean anything to us? We just proved that your entire empire is built on nothing, and we're coming for you next. The bloodline is done." That's when Bronson Reed took the microphone and added to Paul Heyman, "That was just a warning. Roman, when we get our hands on you, it's going to be 10 times worse. The bloodline doesn't scare us. Nobody in WWE scares us. We are the most dangerous team in this company, and we're going to destroy everyone in our path until we're recognized as the dominant force on SmackDown." The arrogance. The complete disrespect. These two men just assaulted a defenseless human being, and they're bragging about it like they accomplished something impressive. They're treating this like a badge of honor instead of the cowardly attack that it actually is. Here's what absolutely grinds my gears about this situation: WWE booked this beatdown to make Breakker and Reed look strong. They want us to see these guys as legitimate threats, as dangerous heels who will do anything to accomplish their goals. But all they've actually done is make them look like bullies who prey on people who can't defend themselves. Want to look tough, Bron? Challenge Roman Reigns to a match. Want to prove you're dominant, Bronson? Fight Solo Sikoa or Jimmy USO in a fair fight. But attacking a 58-year-old manager who's never claimed to be a wrestler? That doesn't make you look strong, that makes you look like a coward who can only win when you have overwhelming physical advantages. Trivia question for the wrestling newsletter family: when was the last time Paul Heyman was physically attacked by a superstar on WWE television, and how did that storyline play out? Let's see who remembers Paul's history of being targeted. Now let's talk about the implications of this attack for the bloodline, because this isn't just about Paul Heyman getting hurt, this is an assault on Roman Reigns' authority. Paul Heyman is the tribal chief's right-hand man, his most trusted advisor, the public face of the bloodline when Roman isn't around. Attacking Paul is like attacking Roman himself, and there is no way Roman Reigns lets this slide without severe consequences. Roman has built the bloodline on the foundation of respect and family. You mess with one member of the family, you mess with all of them. That's been the code since day one. So Breakker and Reed just signed their own death warrants by putting their hands on Paul Heyman. Roman is going to make an example out of them in the most brutal way possible. But here's the question that's been eating at me: where was the bloodline when Paul was being attacked? Where was Roman Reigns? Where were the Usos? Where was Solo Sikoa? Paul was being destroyed in the ring and nobody came to help him. Either they weren't in the building that night, or they were being held back by other wrestlers, or, and this is the scary possibility, they chose not to help Paul for some reason. If the bloodline was there and they chose not to save Paul, that's a major story development. That suggests cracks in the bloodline's unity, suggests that maybe Paul isn't as valued by the family as he thinks he is, suggests that Roman might be losing control of his faction. That would be fascinating character work if WWE explores it properly. But if the bloodline simply wasn't there, if this was just a case of bad timing where Paul was vulnerable, then WWE missed an opportunity to show the bloodline rushing out to save Paul, to show that solidarity and family bond that's supposed to define them. Instead, Paul suffered alone, which makes the bloodline look weak and disorganized. Comment below with your theory: was the bloodline backstage and chose not to help Paul, or were they legitimately not available to save him? What makes more sense for the story? Let's discuss Bron Breakker's role in this attack specifically, because this is a defining moment for his character and not necessarily in a good way. Breakker is supposed to be the next big thing, the second-generation star who's going to carry WWE into the future. He's got the look, the intensity, the athletic ability, everything you need to be a top star in this business. But attacking Paul Heyman? That's the kind of heel heat that can backfire spectacularly. Fans might not want to boo Bron, they might just be disgusted by his character to the point where they don't want to watch him at all. There's a difference between "I hate this villain and I want to see him get his comeuppance" heat and "this makes me uncomfortable and I'm changing the channel" heat. Bron Breakker beating down a 58-year-old non-wrestler is dangerously close to the second category. Yes, it makes him look like a credible threat. Yes, it establishes him as someone who will cross lines that others won't. But it also makes him look like a bully and a coward. And those aren't characteristics that typically lead to long-term success as a heel in WWE. Compare this to how other dominant heels have been booked. When Brock Lesnar destroyed people, he destroyed actual wrestlers who could theoretically fight back. When Roman Reigns was an unstoppable heel, he was beating other main event stars in competitive matches. They didn't need to attack defenseless managers to look tough, their dominance was established through actual wrestling. Breakker attacking Paul feels like a shortcut, a way to generate heat quickly without putting in the work to build his credibility through matches and rivalries. And shortcuts in wrestling rarely work out well in the long run. Here's my controversial take, and I know this is going to make some of you angry: Bron Breakker shouldn't have been booked to attack Paul Heyman at all. He should have refused to participate, should have told creative that his character wouldn't do something so cowardly, should have pushed for different ways to establish himself as a top heel that don't involve beating up non-wrestlers. The fact that he apparently went along with this booking without objection suggests either he doesn't have enough political capital in WWE to say no, or he doesn't see the problem with this kind of storytelling. Either way, it's concerning for his long-term prospects as a top star. Drop a comment telling me if you think this attack helps or hurts Bron Breakker's career trajectory. I'm genuinely curious about the wrestling newsletter community's perspective on this. Now let's talk about Bronson Reed's involvement, because Reed is a different story than Breakker. Reed has been positioned as a monster heel for a while now, someone who destroys everything in his path without mercy or remorse. So Reed participating in this attack is more in character than Breakker doing it, but that doesn't make it right. Reed has been building momentum by destroying wrestlers, not by attacking defenseless managers. His tsunami splash off the top rope has put multiple superstars on the shelf. His dominance has been established through actual competition, not through beating up people who can't fight back. So why does Reed need to attack Paul Heyman? What does this accomplish for his character that destroying another wrestler wouldn't accomplish? Is WWE so creatively bankrupt that the only way they can think to make Reed look dangerous is by having him assault a 58-year-old man? Here's what really bothers me about Reed's role in this: he's better than this booking. Bronson Reed is legitimately one of the most physically impressive and athletically gifted big men in wrestling today. He can do things that men his size shouldn't be able to do. He's got charisma, he's got presence, he's got everything you need to be a major star. But WWE keeps booking him in these shock value segments instead of giving him meaningful feuds and championship opportunities. Reed attacking Paul Heyman generates buzz for 1 week, and then what? Where does his character go from here? What's the long-term plan? Without a clear endgame, this attack just becomes another random act of violence in a company that's increasingly relying on shock value instead of compelling long-term storytelling. And that's a waste of Bronson Reed's talent and potential. Let me ask you this: if you were booking Bronson Reed, would you have him attack Paul Heyman, or would you put him in a different storyline that showcases his abilities better? What's the right way to use Reed on SmackDown? Here's something that's been bothering me that nobody else seems to be talking about: the legal implications of this attack. In kayfabe, Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed just committed assault on live television in front of thousands of witnesses. Paul Heyman could press charges. He could sue WWE for failing to provide a safe working environment. He could sue Breakker and Reed personally for medical bills and emotional distress. Now obviously, wrestling operates in its own weird legal gray area where we're supposed to accept that assaults happen without real-world consequences. But WWE has occasionally dipped into pressing charges storylines when they want to add realism to a feud. Remember when Stone Cold got arrested for attacking Mr. McMahon? Remember when various wrestlers have been suspended or fined for their actions? So why isn't WWE exploring that angle here? Why isn't Nick Aldis, the SmackDown general manager, coming out and announcing that Breakker and Reed are suspended indefinitely pending an investigation? Why isn't Paul Heyman threatening legal action against both wrestlers and WWE management? The lack of consequences makes this feel like WWE is saying violence against non-wrestlers is totally fine and we won't do anything about it. That's a terrible message to send, and it undermines the entire concept of authority figures having any power or legitimacy on WWE programming. If WWE wanted this attack to feel real and important, they should be booking serious consequences for Breakker and Reed. Fines, suspensions, being banned from the building, something that makes this feel like more than just another angle that will be forgotten about next week. Quick question for the comments: should Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed face real consequences for attacking Paul Heyman, or should this just be treated as normal wrestling business? What would make the story better? Let's discuss the potential payoff for the storyline, because if WWE is going to book something this controversial and uncomfortable, they better have an amazing conclusion plan that justifies the entire angle. The obvious payoff is Roman Reigns getting revenge on Breakker and Reed, destroying both of them in brutal fashion and proving that nobody messes with the bloodline without paying a severe price. But here's the problem with that obvious payoff: we've seen Roman destroy challengers 1,000 times already. His entire run as tribal chief has been him dominating everyone who opposes him. Breakker and Reed getting destroyed by Roman doesn't feel special or different, it just feels like more of the same. So what would make this storyline worth the discomfort of watching Paul Heyman get beaten down? Here are some possibilities. Option 1, this leads to a tag team match where Roman partners with someone unexpected to take on Breakker and Reed. Maybe Dean Ambrose returns and teams with Roman for one night to protect Paul. Maybe it's Seth Rollins crossing over from Raw for a Shield reunion. The tag team match itself becomes an event that generates massive interest. Option 2, Paul Heyman's attack causes him to snap psychologically, and he becomes more aggressive and dangerous in his role as advisor. Instead of just being the wise man who talks, Paul starts encouraging Roman to be more violent, more ruthless, more willing to cross lines. The attack transforms Paul's character in interesting ways. Option 3, the bloodline fractures because of this attack. Some members think they should have protected Paul better, others think Paul isn't worth the drama, and the internal conflict leads to the bloodline finally breaking apart, with Breakker and Reed's attack being the catalyst. Option 4, Breakker and Reed's attack is revealed to be part of a larger conspiracy orchestrated by someone who wants to destroy the bloodline from within. The attack wasn't random, it was planned by a mastermind who's been pulling strings behind the scenes. All 4 options have potential to create compelling long-term storytelling, but WWE needs to actually commit to one of these directions instead of just dropping the storyline when they get bored or distracted by something else. Which of these 4 options do you want to see WWE pursue? Comment below with your vote and explain why. Now let's address the elephant in the room: Paul Heyman's selling of this attack, because we need to acknowledge that Paul is a professional who understands how to make moments like this work. The way Paul sold his fear before the attack, the way he crumpled after Breakker's spear, the way he was stretchered out looking completely destroyed, that's masterclass selling that made the attack feel real and serious. If Paul had no-sold this attack or gotten up too quickly or acted like it wasn't a big deal, the entire segment would have fallen flat. But Paul committed fully to making Breakker and Reed look like legitimate monsters, even at the expense of his own character's dignity. That's what separates great performers like Paul from everyone else. He understands that sometimes you have to take the lumps to make the story work. But here's my question: should Paul have to take those lumps at age 58? Should WWE be putting their managers in physical danger like this when there are other ways to establish heel heat that don't involve assaulting non-wrestlers? Is this the best use of Paul Heyman's talents, or is WWE being irresponsible with a valuable asset? I genuinely don't know the answer. Part of me respects Paul's professionalism and willingness to do whatever the story requires. Part of me thinks WWE is being reckless by putting a 58-year-old man in these situations when he doesn't need to be taking bumps at this stage of his career. Wrestling is dangerous, even when everyone's being careful and protective. Injuries can happen in an instant, regardless of age or experience. And while I trust that Breakker and Reed were as safe as possible during this attack, the reality is that Paul was still taking physical punishment that could have gone wrong in a million different ways. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Is WWE being irresponsible by putting Paul Heyman in physical segments like this, or is this just part of the job and Paul knew what he was signing up for? Let's talk about the aftermath of this attack and what we should expect on next week's SmackDown. Obviously, Roman Reigns is going to respond. The tribal chief doesn't let attacks on his family go unanswered. So we're probably looking at Roman cutting an intense promo about how Breakker and Reed just made the biggest mistake of their lives, how they signed their own death warrants, how the bloodline is going to make them suffer for what they did. But promo packages aren't enough. Roman needs to take action. He needs to attack Breakker and Reed with the same viciousness they showed Paul. He needs to make them regret ever putting their hands on the wise man. And he needs to do it in a way that feels satisfying to fans who are rightfully angry about Paul getting beaten down. My prediction? Roman ambushes Breakker and Reed during their entrance or during a backstage segment. He doesn't wait for a scheduled match or a fair fight, he just attacks them the way they attacked Paul, proving that the bloodline plays by the same rules as their enemies. Violence is met with violence. Disrespect is met with destruction. But WWE could also go a different direction. Maybe Roman takes the high road and demands a match at the next premium live event where he can destroy Breakker and Reed legally inside the ring. Maybe he plays the long game, waiting for the perfect moment to strike instead of immediately retaliating. Personally, I hope for the former. I want to see Roman's immediate, visceral rage at what happened to Paul. I want to see the tribal chief lose control and unleash hell on Breakker and Reed in the most brutal way possible. That's the payoff that this angle deserves. What do you want to see next week? Should Roman attack Breakker and Reed immediately, or should he take a more calculated approach? Let me hear your booking ideas in the comments. Here's my final analysis of the Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed attack on Paul Heyman, and then I want to hear your complete thoughts. This segment was effective in generating immediate heat and making Breakker and Reed look dangerous. It accomplished the short-term goal of creating shock value and getting people talking, but I'm concerned about the long-term implications. Attacking a 58-year-old non-wrestler doesn't make you look strong, it makes you look like a bully. It doesn't establish you as a credible main event threat, it establishes you as someone who takes shortcuts instead of proving yourself through actual wrestling. And it sets a dangerous precedent where managers and authority figures are fair game for physical attacks, which could lead to diminishing returns when everyone starts attacking managers to generate heat. WWE needs to follow through on this storyline with a satisfying payoff that justifies the discomfort of watching Paul get destroyed. They need to give us a conclusion where Breakker and Reed face appropriate consequences and Roman Reigns gets revenge in a way that feels cathartic and meaningful. If they do that, if they stick the landing on this angle, then maybe, just maybe, we can look back on this attack as a necessary evil that led to compelling storytelling. But if they drop the ball, if this just becomes another forgotten segment that led nowhere, then this was just pointless violence designed to shock viewers without any deeper purpose. The ball is in WWE's court now. They created this controversial moment. Now they need to make it worth it. If you made it through this entire video, you are incredible, and I need you to do me 3 massive favors right now. First, smash the like button if you think WWE crossed the line with Breakker and Reed attacking Paul Heyman, or if you think this was brilliant heel work that's going to lead to amazing storylines. Second, drop a detailed comment explaining how you would book the aftermath of this attack. What should Roman do? What consequences should Breakker and Reed face? Where does this storyline go from here? I want to hear every perspective on this controversial situation. And third, subscribe to Wrestling Newsletter and hit that notification bell, because SmackDown is about to get insane in the coming weeks as this situation develops, and I'm going to be covering every single moment, every development, every twist as the bloodline seeks revenge on Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed. This is the beginning of something big, and you don't want to miss a second of it.